You know, for years, the internet's kind of felt like the Wild West, right? Well, there's a new sheriff in town, and they've brought a whole new rulebook with them. We're talking about the UK's huge Online Safety Act. This thing is designed to completely shake up our digital world. So let's get into it and figure out what this all actually means for you and me.
All right, here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll look at who these new rules actually apply to. Then we'll dive into this big idea called the duty of care. After that, we'll see what it does to protect kids online, what new powers it gives you, and finally, we'll check out the watchdog that's supposed to make sure everyone follows the rules. It's got some serious teeth.
Okay, so first things first. Before we can really get into the nitty-gritty of the rules, we've got to know who's playing the game, right? Because this law doesn't apply to every single website. It's really zeroing in on specific kinds of services, the ones where things are most likely to go wrong.
And really, this whole thing boils down to a question that's been bugging people forever. Who's responsible for all the stuff we see online? Is it our fault, the people who post it? Or is it the platforms? Well, this new law has a very clear answer. It's pointing the finger squarely at the platforms.
So the first big group they're targeting is what the law calls user-to-user services. It's a bit of a jargony term, but it's simple, really. Just think about any place online where the main point is stuff that other people create. You know, your social media, forums you browse, even a lot of messaging apps. Basically, if you can upload stuff and other people can see it, chances are it's covered by this act.
And then you've got the second group, search services. And yeah, this is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. We're talking about the huge search engines we all use every single day. Now, their job is a little different because they don't host the content themselves, right? But they're the front door to everything else. And the act says, hey, you've got a part to play in this too. You have to help keep people away from the bad stuff.
So who's the new sheriff I mentioned? Who's actually going to enforce all this? Well, that job goes to Ofcom. You might know them as the UK's communications regulator. This act gives them a whole bunch of new powers, turning them into the official watchdog for the UK's entire online world. Their job is to make sure these big companies are actually following the new rules. So what's at the absolute heart of this new rulebook? Well, it all comes down to this idea called a duty of care. And look, this isn't some friendly suggestion. It's a brand new, legally binding requirement for these platforms to actually take responsibility for keeping their users safe.
Now, this is where things get really interesting, because the law splits content into two buckets. On one side, you have straight-up illegal content. Think terrorism, child abuse material, the really nasty stuff. The duty there is simple. Get it off the platform, for everyone. But then, there's this other, much trickier category. Stuff that's legal but harmful. And here the job is different. Platforms have to make sure kids can't see it, and they have to give us adults tools to avoid it if we don't want to see it either.
And this whole duty of care thing, it's not just a vague idea. It actually forces these companies to follow a three-step plan. Step 1, they can't just sit around and wait for bad things to happen. They have to actively go looking for risks on their own platform. Step 2, they have to build systems. Think content moderation, user support to deal with those risks. And step 3, and this is a big one, they can't do it all behind closed doors. They have to publish reports telling all of us what steps they're taking to keep us safe.
Okay, let's zoom in on what might be the single biggest goal of this act: protecting kids. The law is absolutely crystal clear on this point. If there's a chance kids are using your service, you are going to be held to a way, way higher standard of care. And when it comes to the most dangerous stuff, the law has basically a zero-tolerance policy. We're not talking about just making it harder for kids to see this content. We're talking about preventing it. Platforms now have a legal duty to make sure kids never even encounter what the Act calls primary priority harmful content. So what are we talking about here? Well, the Act gets very specific. It's things like content that encourages suicide or self-harm, stuff that promotes eating disorders, pornography, and of course, extreme violence. The rule is simple. If the platform thinks a user is a child, this kind of content has to be blocked. Period.
Right, so the billion-dollar question is, how on earth are platforms supposed to do that?
The Act has an answer. It says they must use highly effective age-checking tools. Now, this could mean age verification, where you have to prove your age with ID, or it could be age estimation, where some tech makes an educated guess. But either way, the free ride is over. They have to get good at telling kids and adults apart.
But this law isn't just about what companies have to do in their secret server rooms. A huge part of it is about giving you more power, putting more control right back in your hands. So let's talk about the new tools you're going to get as an adult user.
Okay, so the biggest platforms out there, they're now going to have to give you a whole toolkit to control what you see. For instance, sick of anonymous trolls? You'll have the option to verify who you are. And then, and this is the cool part, you can filter out anyone who hasn't verified themselves. You'll also get more say over the kind of legal but harmful stuff you see. And they have to provide reporting systems that actually work and are easy to use.
Now, whenever you talk about rules for the internet, a huge red flag always pops up. What about free speech? And that's a fair question. The Act actually tackles this head-on. It legally requires platforms to pay particular regard to protecting freedom of expression. That's not just some nice-to-have suggestion. It's a legal duty they have to constantly weigh against their duty to keep us safe.
And this balancing act gets super specific. The law actually creates extra, stronger protections for two special categories: journalistic content and content of democratic importance. The whole idea is to build in a safety net, things like faster ways to appeal, to stop important news stories or political debate from getting accidentally zapped by an overzealous algorithm.
Look, a rulebook is pretty useless if nobody's there to enforce it, right? So this brings us to the final piece of the puzzle: how the Act gives its watchdog, Ofcom, some very, very real teeth.
So this is the big one. What actually happens if one of these giant global tech companies just ignores the rules? What's the comeback? Well, the penalties are designed to be so big, they're basically impossible to ignore. And here it is, the number that makes everyone sit up and pay attention. Ofcom can fine a company up to 10%, not of its UK profit, but of its annual global revenue. Let me say that again, global revenue. For the biggest tech giants, we're talking about fines that could be in the tens of billions. That is a truly mind-boggling amount of money.
But it's not like they just jump straight to the nuclear option. Ofcom has this ladder of enforcement. They'll start by asking for information, doing audits. If a company still doesn't play ball, they'll issue official warnings. Then come those huge fines. And if, after all that, a platform still refuses to comply, well, the final step is seeking a court order to get them blocked entirely in the UK, just switched off.
And if you think that's tough, it gets even more personal. The law doesn't just go after the company's bank account. It can go after the execs. Senior managers can now be held criminally liable if their company fails to cooperate with Ofcom's investigations. Suddenly, it's not just a business problem, it's a personal, potentially criminal one for the people in the boardroom.
So there you have it. The Online Safety Act isn't some far-off idea anymore. It's here. It's the law. And it's one of the most ambitious attempts anywhere in the world to tame the internet. But it's all built on this fundamental balancing act, which leaves us with a huge, lingering question. Will it manage to make the internet a safer place without sacrificing the freedom of expression that makes it so valuable in the first place?